I never thought serving champagne in a crowded hotel ballroom would change my life. I was just a black waitress in a white uniform, invisible to the wealthy guests. But then his eyes found mine, the billionaire who wasn't supposed to notice me. That moment began my secret love story. Before I share the truth about how a hotel job turned into the most complicated love of my life, make sure you subscribe, hit the like button, and share this story. More stories of love, betrayal, and second chances are coming. Don't miss them. I used to think my life was predictable. Wake up before dawn, put on the stiff white shirt and black slacks, tie my hair back so tightly it gave me a headache, and head to the hotel. That hotel wasn't just where I worked, it was where I learned how invisible a person could feel. Guests rushed past me every day, their eyes sliding over me as if I were just another piece of furniture. I carried trays heavy enough to bruise my arms, smiled until my cheeks ached, and said, "Yes, sir," or "Right away, ma'am." So many times that the words stopped meaning anything. Working as a waitress in a place filled with wealth was like living in two different worlds at once. I served food I could never afford, wine I couldn't even pronounce, and watched people laugh without worry, as if life had given them nothing but silver platters. And then there was me, standing in the background, sweating in my uniform, trying not to drop a glass because one mistake could cost me my job. The hardest part wasn't the physical work, it was the feeling of being unseen. People rarely looked at me, and when they did, it was usually to complain that their drink was too warm or their bread was too cold. Sometimes I'd leave a room full of chatter and clinking glasses, and I'd feel smaller than when I walked in. Smaller, but heavier too, carrying the weight of everyone else's comfort. But what people didn't know was that behind the smile, behind the tired eyes, I had dreams. At night, when I got home and peeled off that uniform, I would sit on my small bed and imagine a different life. A life where I didn't just serve, but was seen, truly seen. I dreamed of respect, of someone looking at me like I mattered, like my voice wasn't just background noise. And love. I wanted that too. A love that wasn't rushed or hidden in shadows. A love that could breathe, that could grow without fear. Still, most days those dreams felt too far away. I'd convinced myself to focus on what was real, my job, my bills, the exhaustion that clung to me like a second skin. I told myself love and respect were luxuries, and luxuries weren't meant for people like me. I carried that belief like a shield, protecting myself from disappointment. Yet somewhere deep inside, I also carried a stubborn kind of hope. Even when I felt invisible, I knew there had to be more to my story. I didn't know when or how, but I couldn't shake the feeling that life was waiting to surprise me. And I was right, because one night, on a shift that started out like every other, the routine broke. My world shifted, and everything I thought I knew about myself, about love, and about where I belonged, changed forever. The night it happened, I remember thinking it was just another endless gala. The ballroom smelled of roses and expensive perfume, the kind that lingers in the air long after the women leave. Chandeliers sparkled above me, brighter than the stars I rarely had time to look at. My hands carried trays of champagne flutes that seemed more valuable than my entire month's paycheck. Guests in designer suits and glittering dresses floated past me, their laughter echoing off marble walls. I moved like a shadow among them, smiling, nodding, pretending their world didn't make mine feel small. And then, without warning, I felt it. A pair of eyes watching me. Not the dismissive glance I was used to, not the irritated stare of someone impatient for service. No, this gaze lingered, steady, curious. I tried to ignore it at first. People sometimes looked at the staff like we were part of the decor, but this was different. This gaze carried weight, and against my better judgment, I looked back. That was the first time I saw him. He stood apart from the crowd, not laughing, not mingling. A tall man in a perfectly cut suit, his presence alone seemed to create space around him. I didn't recognize him at first. Billionaires weren't exactly part of my social circle, but there was something in the way others glanced at him, a quiet deference in their body language. He was someone important, and yet, when his eyes met mine, I didn't feel small. I felt noticed. I quickly turned away, embarrassed, convincing myself it was a mistake. Maybe he wasn't even looking at me. But minutes later, as I returned with another tray, our eyes locked again. This time he smiled. Just slightly, the kind of smile that carries more meaning than words. My chest tightened. Men at these events rarely noticed me unless they were barking orders or flirting out of boredom. But this felt intentional. When I finally approached his table to offer champagne, my hands trembled slightly, and I prayed he wouldn't see it. He reached for a glass, his fingers brushing mine for the briefest moment. And then, in a voice calm and deep, he said, "Thank you. You must be exhausted tonight." I froze. It was such a simple thing, but no one had ever spoken to me that way during work, like I was human, like he saw the hours and weight behind my smile. All I could manage was a polite nod before hurrying away, cheeks burning. For the rest of the night I tried to shake it off, telling myself not to be foolish. He was a billionaire. Men like him lived in glass towers while I lived paycheck to paycheck. Our worlds didn't touch. And yet, as the night went on, I felt his gaze more than once, steady and sure. By the end of my shift, I knew this wasn't just another night. Something had begun, something I couldn't explain, but something I would never forget. The shift was almost over when a supervisor tapped me on the shoulder. "Room 1203, he whispered, slipping a keycard into my hand. "Special request. Don't be late." My stomach tightened. Normally I hated private room service. Too many opportunities for rich guests to treat staff like servants in the old sense of the word. But I couldn't argue. I adjusted my uniform, grabbed the requested tray, and took the elevator up. When the doors opened, my heart nearly stopped. Standing in the doorway was him, the man from the ballroom, the billionaire. For a moment, I thought there had been some mistake. Maybe the tray was meant for another room, another guest. But he smiled softly, stepping aside as though he had been waiting for me. "Come in," he said, his voice low and steady. I hesitated. Rules at the hotel were strict. We weren't supposed to linger in guest rooms, and being alone with a man of his power could cost me more than just my job. But curiosity tugged at me stronger than fear. I stepped inside. The suite was breathtaking. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, golden light spilling across velvet chairs and marble floors. But my eyes weren't on the room. They were on him. He loosened his tie, set aside his cufflinks, and for the first time all night he looked less like a billionaire and more like a man carrying invisible weight. "You looked uncomfortable down there," he said quietly, almost as if he had read my thoughts. I swallowed hard, unsure how to answer. "It's just part of the job." He studied me, his gaze steady but not invasive. "No, it's not just the job. People looked right through you, but I didn't. I couldn't." My breath caught. I didn't know what to say because no one had ever said something like that to me, not in this world of glittering chandeliers and cold stares. He motioned to the chair across from him. "Sit, just for a moment. You look like you've been running all night." Every instinct told me to refuse, to keep my distance, to stay professional. But something about the way he said it, gentle, almost weary, made me lower myself into the chair. What followed was nothing like I expected. We talked, not about him, not about money, but about me. He asked where I grew up, what I wanted out of life, what it felt like working nights when everyone else was celebrating. I found myself answering honestly, surprised by the ease in my voice. And then he told me about himself, not the polished version people saw in magazines, but the truth. The loneliness of power, the hollowness of relationships built on status, the endless cycle of being admired but never known. In that quiet hotel room, walls faded. He wasn't a billionaire, and I wasn't just a waitress. We were two souls, tired of being unseen, finally recognizing each other. I didn't know it then, but that conversation would change everything. After that night in his suite, nothing felt the same. I went back to work the next day wearing the same stiff uniform, carrying the same heavy trays. But inside, I was different. His words echoed in me, soft and persistent, like a secret I wasn't ready to share. We didn't speak openly in the hotel halls. He was too careful, and so was I. But every so often, our eyes would meet across the room. In those stolen seconds, it felt as though no one else existed. Just us. A silent understanding, dangerous and thrilling, binding us closer each day. It didn't take long before we began meeting in private again. At first, it was short moments. He'd ask for late-night service, and I'd deliver coffee or wine. But once the door closed, the pretense melted away. We'd talk for hours, about everything and nothing. He wanted to know who I was beyond the uniform, and for the first time in my life, I wanted to be known. Sometimes he'd just listen, his eyes fixed on me as though my stories were more valuable than gold. Other times, he'd share pieces of himself that no one in his world would ever guess. The isolation of boardrooms, the pressure of endless expectations, the fear that love was something his money had stolen from him. Slowly, I stopped guarding my heart. I told myself I wouldn't fall, that I couldn't afford to. But love doesn't ask permission. It sneaks in quietly, like a breath, until suddenly it's the air you can't live without. Still, we lived in shadows. When my shift ended, I'd linger in hidden hallways, waiting for the text that told me it was safe to slip away to his suite. We never walked hand in public, never shared the simple freedom of being seen together. Our love existed behind closed doors, fragile yet fierce, like a flame shielded from the wind. And even in those secret moments, I felt torn. Part of me basked in the tenderness he gave so freely, the way his voice softened when he spoke my name, the way his presence made me feel like I belonged to something larger than myself. But another part of me carried guilt and fear. What if someone found out? What if it was all temporary, a distraction until he returned to his glittering world? Every laugh, every touch, every whispered confession felt like both a gift and a gamble. Yet I couldn't walk away. He made me feel seen in ways I had only dreamed of. And when his arms wrapped around me, when his heart beat steady against mine, I wanted to believe it was real. In those quiet nights, tucked away from the world, we created a universe of our own. A secret, dangerous, beautiful universe. But deep down, I knew secrets don't stay hidden forever. For a while, I convinced myself we could go on forever like that. Hidden meetings, quiet conversations, love tucked away where no one could reach it. But secrets have a way of leaking into the air, of whispering themselves into ears you never wanted listening. And soon, the whispers began. It started with glances from my co-workers. They'd catch me coming back from the upper floors late at night, my cheeks flushed, my uniform slightly wrinkled. At first, I brushed it off, but then I began to hear the murmurs in the staff lounge. She thinks she's special. Probably just another rich man's plaything. Girls like her don't end up with men like him. Their words sank into me like poison. I tried to ignore them, but late at night, lying in my small bed, they echoed louder than the silence. Was I fooling myself? Was I nothing more than a secret fling, a passing curiosity for a man who had the world at his feet? The doubt grew heavier every time I looked at him. I wanted to trust what we had, but the difference between us loomed like a shadow. He lived in a world of power and privilege, where women wore diamonds and travelled in private jets. I lived paycheck to paycheck, my future mapped out in long shifts and worn shoes. How could I possibly belong in his life? One evening, when we met in his suite, the questions tumbled out before I could stop them. What are we doing? I asked, my voice trembling. Do you really see a future here, or am I just another distraction until something easier comes along? He looked at me, stunned, and for a moment I regretted saying it, but then his expression softened. He reached for my hand, his voice low, almost pleading. You're not a distraction. Do you think I'd risk everything just to pass the time? I've never felt this way before, not with anyone. I wanted to believe him, but the fear gnawed at me. My heart told me his words were true, but my mind painted cruel pictures of the future. Me standing on the sidelines, while his world carried on without me. Our love, once simple in its secrecy, became complicated by the outside noise. Every laugh we shared was shadowed by the possibility of discovery. Every kiss carried the weight of what-ifs. There were nights when I thought about ending it, walking away before the heartbreak could come, protecting myself from the inevitable crash of two worlds colliding. But then he'd look at me, really look at me, and all my walls would crumble. I was trapped between fear and love, doubt and desire. And though my heart was torn, one truth pulsed louder than the rest. No matter the risk, I wasn't ready to let him go. The tension between love and fear built inside me until it felt like I was carrying two lives, one filled with joy in his arms, the other heavy with doubt when I was alone. I knew a moment would come when I couldn't hide behind secrecy anymore, when I'd have to choose whether to step into his world or walk away from it forever. That moment came sooner than I expected. It was a Saturday night gala, one of those glittering events where guests floated in gowns worth more than my annual salary. I was assigned to serve in the ballroom, which meant I couldn't avoid him. I told myself to keep my head down, to move like a shadow as always. But when I walked through the crowd, balancing a tray of champagne, my eyes found his instantly, and this time he didn't look away. For a split second, our secret threatened to spill into the open. His gaze lingered too long, his smile too soft, and I felt the air shift. I hurried away, but I could sense it. The room had noticed. Whispers rippled around me like cracks spreading in glass. Later that night, he found me in the staff hallway. His face was tense, his voice urgent. I can't do this anymore. Hiding, pretending. I want you in my life, not just in the shadows. My heart pounded. Part of me wanted to throw myself into his arms and say yes, but another part trembled with fear. Do you know what that means? I asked. Do you know what people will say, what they'll do? They'll never accept someone like me beside someone like you. He reached for my hands, his grip warm and steady. Let them talk. I've spent my whole life surrounded by people who only see my money. You see me. And that's worth more than their approval. Tears burned in my eyes. I wanted to believe him, to trust that love could shield us from the cruelty of the world. But I also knew the weight of reality. The whispers at work, the looks from guests, the invisible wall society builds between people like us. It was all real, and it wasn't going away. That night, lying in bed, I replayed his words over and over. He wanted to fight for us, but could I? Was I strong enough to step into the storm with him, knowing the world might never see me as more than a scandal? The choice pressed down on me, heavy and unavoidable. I could protect myself by walking away, keeping my dignity intact, but breaking my own heart. Or I could leap into the unknown with him, risking everything for a love that felt more real than anything I had ever known. By dawn, as the city stirred awake, I realized the truth. No matter how frightening, no matter how uncertain, I couldn't go back to the girl who lived unseen. I had been found, seen, and I couldn't let that go. The turning point had arrived. My heart had already made its choice. The decision weighed on me, but once my heart had chosen, there was no turning back. I walked into the hotel that evening with a strange calm, almost as if my soul had finally caught up with itself. I no longer wanted to hide, no longer wanted to shrink myself just to make others comfortable. If the world was going to see us, then let it. It happened during another event, a dinner for foreign investors. I was working, weaving through tables, when I saw him across the room. Our eyes met, and for the first time, I didn't look away. I let my gaze linger, steady, unflinching, as if silently telling him, I'm ready. Later, when the crowd thinned, he approached me, not in a secret hallway or behind closed doors, but right there in the open. He didn't care about the stares. He reached for my hand, his voice firm yet gentle. Enough hiding, enough pretending. The ballroom seemed to fall silent around us. I could feel the weight of every pair of eyes, the whisper of judgment spreading like wildfire. My co-workers stared, mouths half open. Guests exchanged knowing looks. But in that moment, none of it mattered. For the first time, I wasn't invisible. For the first time, I was being chosen, out loud, in the light. He pulled me closer, his words low but certain. You deserve to be seen. You deserve to be loved, not in secret, not in shadows, with me. Always tears welled in my eyes, but they weren't from fear. They were from the release of years spent being overlooked, dismissed, treated as less. Standing beside him, I finally felt equal. Not because of his wealth or his status, but because he looked at me as if I was the only person in the world who mattered. The days that followed weren't easy. The whispers turned into stories, the stares into open disapproval. Some guests complained, some co-workers distanced themselves. But through it all, he never wavered. He walked beside me, hand in hand, making it clear to anyone watching that his choice was final. And as the noise of others grew louder, something inside me grew stronger. I realized that love isn't measured by how the world sees it. It's measured by how it makes you feel when the world is against you. And with him, I felt seen, cherished, alive. Looking back now, I know that night in his hotel room was the beginning of everything. I was just a black waitress, invisible to the world, carrying silent dreams of love and respect. And he was a white billionaire, living in a world of glittering lights but drowning in loneliness. Two worlds that should never have collided, but they did. And from that collision, we built something real. So when I say my life changed, I don't just mean the job or the whispers. I mean me. I found love where I least expected it, and in his arms, I finally found myself. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who believes love is impossible. More stories like this are waiting for you, and maybe one will remind you that love can change everything, just when you least expect it.